king, warrior, magician, lover. This is the title of Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette's seminal book, published in 1992 to rave reviews, and still used today as an important source in contemporary discourse on the masculine psyche. In it, they explore these four major archetypes in both their optimal and dysfunctional expressions, and ask whether the absence in our modern world of rites of passage rituals for adolescent boys has resulted in many generations of menfolk having become somehow stuck in a kind of arrested development from which they struggle to emerge into what might be deemed their optimal maturity. And might this also be true of our culture as a whole? Right now, astrologers are telling us that the planets are aligned in extremely powerful ways, not experienced for 6,000 years, since the beginnings of the gradual transition from the ancient lunar matrilineal societies toward the solar patriarchal world of today. The resulting consciousness has enabled great things, great strides forward, and yet there is a sense that all is far from well. For millennia, it seems, our world has been characterized by war and by violence against a multitude of enemies, and even against nature herself. We have not looked at ourselves in the round, as it were, and are facing potentially catastrophic consequences. Yet maybe, as the astrologers say, the time has come for our collective psyche to transform, to undergo a huge initiation that will enable the emergence of a more humane and responsible world. So what follows is not just about boys and growing up, but about modernity and our culture too. As Jung prophesied, a shift is taking place in the contemporary psyche, a reconciliation between the two great polarities, a union of opposites, a sacred marriage between the long dominant but now alienated masculine and the long suppressed but now ascending feminine. Developments in quantum theory over the last 100 years have set the scene for this reunion, returning consciousness to the core of our understanding, gradually displacing the purely mechanistic assumptions of Newtonian science. But in order for this new paradigm to be embraced, says Richard Tarnas, the masculine must undergo a sacrifice, an ego death. This is, of course, precisely what occurs in the rites of passage ceremonies of tribal and indigenous societies, where there is a marked ritualistic transition from boy to manhood. The boy is taken from home, from his mother, sometimes in the middle of the night, by tribal elders, mature men in the company of the shaman of the tribe. Often the boy is taken to a cave or to the depths of the forest, and there undergoes initiatory experiences from which he will return changed. Afterwards, he will inhabit his own dwelling. He will still love his mother, of course, but he will now be his own man, with responsibilities which will go beyond his own personal needs, to incorporate those of his family and the wider collective and spiritual well-being of everyone. But what happened exactly in the depths of the night? And why was it deemed so essential to the needs of the tribe? Would the boy not have achieved his manhood anyway, without such dramatic intervention? Not so easily, says Moore in his earlier book, The Archetype of Initiation, Sacred Space, Ritual Process and Personal Transformation. And for the modern boy, this is even harder. Sure, Moore concedes, there are certain pseudo-initiation ceremonies that take place in the modern world, but these are normally found in certain dysfunctional groups like prisons, boarding schools and gangs, from which the boy does not emerge as a man, but rather in servitude to the narrow ideals of such groups. The military, too, has certain initiatory rites, yet whilst these are successful in creating warriors, says Tom van der Linden, they are not so successful in bringing men home intact, so to speak, when the battle is done. What makes the tribal initiation more successful is that it is always conducted by the shaman, the elder or wise man of the tribe, like the magician in myth and fairy tale, someone of an entirely different calibre than the boarding school bully, the gang or powerful military leader. The magician or shaman stands between worlds, as it were, at the crossroads, the threshold, and he leads the adolescent temporarily away from what Jung called the spirit of the times, the ordinary, everyday world, into the spirit of the depths, the non-ordinary realm, where the initiatory experience is constellated. Anthropologists call this space the liminal realm, a term related to the Latin word for threshold, limen, first introduced by Arnold van Gennep in his book The Rites of Passage, referring to the middle phase of a threefold initiation rite. The first phase of liminality is characterized by extreme disorientation. One's previous structures are literally dismembered, and one experiences a kind of death. The initiate becomes, for the duration, like the dying and resurrected gods of myth and religion, like the murdered Egyptian god Osiris, cut into 14 parts and scattered throughout the land, like the goddess Persephone, lost in the underworld, or Jesus, crucified, buried, and descended into hell for 3 days and nights, mirroring the dark of the moon. These are the great mythic and religious characters in which the initiate's own experience finds its reflection. For the young boy, the presence of the shaman, of the magician, is crucial. He has been where the boy must go, to this place where everything he thought he was comes into question. Like the Sumerian goddess Inanna, as she descends into the great below, he is gradually stripped of all his outer clothing, the vestments, if you like, of his identity, his status, his sense of himself. And this can be truly terrifying. He has entered the alchemical vessel, we might say, and must be dissolved and reformed, as the base metal within is transformed into gold, the emblem of the new, evolved consciousness. Without the shaman, however, the spiritual alchemist, the boy may be ripped to shreds and emerge either mad or not at all, and be forever held in a state of perpetual becoming, which is never achieved. These are perilous times indeed, for the disorientation, the death and fragmentation of the former self is real, and must, as a rite, be conducted within a safe space with secure boundaries. Only then can the experience of what we might call the tomb be transformed into that of a womb, where the new self is seeded, incubated, and reborn. It is deep space, inner space, sacred space, as defined and distinguished from the profane by anthropologist Mircea Eliade in his renowned book, The Sacred and the Profane, The Nature of Religion. Sacred space connects us with this deep, regenerative core, he explains, unlike profane space that has no fixed point or centre from which to gain orientation. Profane space has no axis mundi, no cosmic tree or pillar leading to the heavens. And this is the experience of modernity, he asserts, in which people struggle to locate a centre. And it's this key idea, this notion of the regenerative power of sacred space, that makes it so potent in the fullest sense of the word. Building on Eliade's work and that of Arnold van Gennep, anthropologist Victor Turner expanded the notion of liminality to include the term liminoid experience. Both refer to non-ordinary states, but unlike liminal experience, the liminoid is experienced within the context of modernity. It occurs outside the boundaries of the delineated sacred rite and without the presence of a ritual elder. Such states may be experienced at festivals, concerts, on vacation, pilgrimage, or in the face of a collective or personal crisis. Periods of time when one slips out of the ordinary structured time and space and feels unexpectedly bonded with others sharing the same experience, or when great cracks suddenly open up in life in response to sudden change. These experiences, says Turner, can be profoundly spiritual, opening doors we never knew were there, bringing us to the threshold of potential transformation and growth, and they can be extremely nourishing to the soul. Yet their effects are often transitory, he says, and are unlikely to lead to lasting transformation facilitated by the liminal rite. Liminoid experiences can be dangerous too, adds Moore, for without guidance, one can get stuck, so to speak. This can happen in a grieving process, for example, when one does not know how to leave the grieving state, or in response to any kind of post-traumatic shock that lingers over long, forever raw when approached. It can be true for drug users too, whose initial highs devolve into addiction from which they cannot find their way back. In the absence of a ritual elder, or at the hands of an inexperienced one, the developmental potential of the experience may never be fully realised. Truly liminal space, truly transformative space, truly sacred space, in the sense that tribal peoples used it for transformations, always has ritual leaders, says Moore. This is partly because the archetypes encountered can be so incredibly powerful that a lone individual can be psychically and potentially irrevocably shattered. No one can control these encounters. The authentic shaman knows this very well. It is vital, says Moore, for such a person to remain in both worlds, as it were, stewarding the boundary, entering in, but never fully, never to the point of immersion, which is the prerogative of the initiate for the duration. This movement through liminal space, from disorientation to integration, is the journey toward individuation referred to in depth psychology. Here, the therapist becomes the shaman or the magician, and the clearly delineated therapeutic process becomes the vessel, the sacred ritualistic space. Within these safe and stewarded boundaries, ancient and modern, though we may be broken, we often come closer than ever before to what is numinous. So close, say Moore and Gillette, we are glowing. For after dismemberment, after limbo, after the emptiness that may follow, one may break through to an encounter with the mystical. In the mythological journey, as described by Campbell, this is where the hero meets the goddess, so to speak, and drinks the draught of paradise from her sacred vessel. So many exquisite tales exist recounting these enchanted encounters, experienced at the heart of the inner world, are told across the globe. From such heights, it can be difficult to find the will to return. Most initiates are humbled by such experience, whilst others struggle with inflation. And yet again, this is where the skill of the shaman can be so critical. Moore says we should be respectful of clients who struggle in these ways to come down, as it were. Their experience is so true, so real, more real than anything might ever be again, and yet it is the role of the shaman, the magician, the therapist or healer to make sure of their safe return to earth as mortals, not gods. And this is absolutely key. For in the end, the real hero, as all the best stories tell us in no uncertain terms, is the one who achieves humility, who transcends any lingering infantile grandiosity, who learns to bend the knee, if you like, to take off his shoes and prostrate himself in acknowledgement of forces greater and beyond himself. Finally, the initiate must surrender. He must become a servant, never a master. A servant to a mystery more profound than can ever fully be known. And this, say the authors, is what mature masculinity looks like. Yes, he has touched and been touched by the sublime. Yet the success of the initiation, the mythic quest, turns on his ability to come down and to come home, to bring his new-found maturity, the boon, as Joseph Campbell says, the treasure, to bear upon the world as it is, in the cold light of day, the Monday morning, if you like, after the high of the weekend. At the end of any liminal rite, ancient or modern, the initiates are told quite abruptly, the rite has ended. Come back to yourselves, blow out your candles, snuff out the incense, withdraw from the sacred space, and rejoin the everyday world until the next time, or whenever the need arises. But for now, go forth into the ordinary world. And for the young boy, now a man, go back to your village, back to your new dwelling place, remembering all you have come to know, in such ways as to benefit each and every member of the tribe, of the entire creation.